Welcome to teachmeall.com. In this video, we're going to show you how to change the rear brake pads and rotors on this 2007 Toyota Camry LE.
That's right, Greg. You know, the rear brakes don't generally wear as much as the front ones, but you still need to keep a check on them.
Now we're going to go over the tools that we used to do this project.
We need a jack, 2 jack stands, and 2 wheel chocks. 2 new rear brake rotors, and new rear brake pads. We have some hose clamp pliers, a disc brake spreader, a large C-clamp, a 21mm socket and ratchet to remove the lug nuts. On our Camry has a locking lug nut, and we need this tool to remove that lug nut. This tool is usually located in the glove box. Also need a 14mm socket and ratchet for the caliper guide pin bolts. We need a 13mm socket for the bolts that we use to press the rotor off. And the 2 bolts we use are M8 1.25-25mm. We need a flathead screwdriver, a 14mm wrench to hold the guide pin bolt. We have an 8mm wrench to loosen the bleeder screw, a 1/2 inch drive torque wrench, some .3 brake fluid, some brake parts cleaner, some anti-seize lubricant, high temperature caliper grease, thread lock, a brake bleeder kit, a bungee cord to tie up our rotor, some safety glasses, a shop lot, and some shop towels. Then we're going to put our wheel chocks in front of both front tires, and then we're going to loosen up our lug nuts on our wheels. Here we're using the special tool to loosen up the locking lug nut. And remove the tool and just use our regular 21mm socket and ratchet to loosen up the rest of the lug nuts. Here we're moving to the other side. Loosen up the special locking lug nut as the first one. Remove the tool. Then we'll go ahead and loosen up the rest of the lug nuts. Then we're going to jack the vehicle up. Once the wheels are off the ground, position our jack stands, and also never crawl under a vehicle unless it's supported by jack stands. Then we lower the vehicle onto the jack stands, and we'll continue removing the lug nuts on the rear tires. Then we'll store our lug nuts into the holes in the rim, just for safekeeping, and we'll slide the wheel up under the car. This is for convenience and for safety. Then move to the other side and do the exact same thing. Then we're going to review the positions of the bolts that we'll be discussing during this project. Here's the lower caliper guide pin bolt. It requires a 14mm socket. The upper caliper guide pin bolt. This is the bleeder screw. It has a dust cover that needs to be removed, and it uses an 8mm box-in wrench. And the upper caliper bracket bolt requires a 14mm socket. And here's the position of the lower caliper bracket bolt. Then we're going to use our hose clamp pliers and clamp the brake line. Then remove our dust cover from the bleeder screw and put our 8mm box-in wrench over the bleeder screw. Attach our brake bleeder kit to the bleeder screw. Open up the bleeder screw. Then we're going to compress the piston inside the caliper with our large C-clamp. This will allow us to easily remove the caliper from the rotor. Now we remove the C-clamp, tighten up the bleeder screw, remove our brake bleeder kit, remove our 8mm wrench, reinstall our dust cover. Now we're going to remove the caliper guide pin bolts using our 14mm socket and ratchet and our 14mm open-end wrench to hold the caliper guide pin bolts in place as we loosen them up. Once we remove both caliper guide pin bolts, we'll slide the caliper off the rotor. We'll tie it up using our bungee cord. This keeps pressure off the brake lines. Then we're going to remove our pads using a standard screwdriver. And then we're going to remove the caliper mounting bracket, again using our 14mm socket and ratchet. With both bolts removed, we can slide our caliper mounting bracket off the rotor. Now we're going to show you how to press the rotors off the vehicle using our bolts we showed earlier. We thread the 2 bolts in. And we'll tighten them up using our 13mm socket and ratchet. We alternate from side to side to try to pull the rotor off evenly. Sometimes if your rotors do not want to come off easily, it can be the emergency brake pads holding it in place. Remove this little access port, then we're going to move the rotor and we're going to show you what you need to adjust to easily remove the brake rotor. Inside here you see a little wheel. This wheel will allow you to adjust the emergency brakes. Here we're turning the emergency brakes in and we're turning the wheel from top to bottom. Then you put the new rotor on, make sure you line up the hole in the rotor with the port so you can access the emergency brakes again. Here you can see the ports lined up correctly. Then we're going to clean off the new rotor with our brake parts cleaner and a clean rag. And we clean the front and the back. Now once we have that clean, we're going to install our rubber plug for the emergency brake access. Then we're going to prep our caliper mounting bracket. First we pull out the guide pins, wipe off any grease that may be on there, and we'll coat them with some anti-seize lubricant. And we'll slide it back into place. Make sure it seats properly within the rubber boot. And then we'll do the exact same thing with the other guide pin. Now our new brake pads do not come with new brake hardware, so inspect the old hardware on the caliper mounting bracket. Make sure it's in good condition. We're just going to reuse our old. And here we're coating the area where the pads slide with some anti-seize lubricant. This will allow the pads to slide more freely. Then we're going to put some thread lock on our caliper mounting bracket bolts. Slide our caliper mounting bracket back into place, line up our bolts, tighten them by hand. And finish tightening them with our 14mm socket and ratchet. Then we're going to torque the caliper mounting bracket bolts to 34 foot-pounds unless otherwise noted. Then we're going to get ready to install our new brake pads. We'll transfer this low wear indicator clip from the old pads to the new. And this low wear indicator clip goes on the inner brake pad. Then we're going to slide our brake pads into place. And we're going to coat the back of the brake pads with some high temperature caliper grease. We're going to get ready to reinstall our caliper. Remove it from the bungee cord. Remove our dust cover. Reinstall our 8mm box end or line wrench. Install our brake bleeder kit. Open up the bleeder screw. Use one of the old brake pads and use our disc brake spreader to compress the piston within the caliper. Then we tighten up the bleeder screw. Remove our brake bleeder kit. Remove our wrench and reinstall our dust cover. And we'll slide the caliper over the new pads and the rotor. Then we're going to put some thread lock on our caliper guide pin bolts. Install the guide pin bolts into the guide pins. Tighten them up by hand. Then we'll torque them to 32 foot-pounds unless otherwise noted. Then we're going to move our hose clamp pliers and move to the other side. Clamp our brake line, remove our dust cover off our bleeder screw, install our 8mm wrench, the brake bleeder kit, loosen up the bleeder screw, compress the piston within the caliper with our large C-clamp. Now we'll remove the C-clamp, tighten up our bleeder screw, remove the brake bleeder kit, reinstall our dust cover. Now we're going to remove the caliper guide pin bolt, starting with the top one, loosening it up. Using our 14mm socket and ratchet and our 14mm open end wrench. Then we move to the bottom, loosen it up, and remove the bottom and then the top. Slide our caliper off the rotor and tie it up using our bungee cord. Remove our old brake pads. Then we're going to remove the caliper mounting bracket using our 14mm socket and ratchet. Remove the mounting bracket bolts and slide the mounting bracket out of the way. And use our bolts now, screw them into place to remove our old rotor. Tighten them up with our 13mm socket and ratchet, remembering to alternate from side to side. Then we'll slide our old rotor off. And we're going to line up our new rotor, again making sure the access port for the emergency brakes is lined up correctly on the rotor. Clean it off using some brake parts cleaner and a clean rag. Transfer the access port plug. Then we're going to prepare our caliper mounting bracket by using some anti-seize lubricant on the caliper guide pins. Make sure you inspect your old brake hardware, and again lubricate the hardware with some anti-seize lubricant. Put some thread lock on the caliper mounting bracket bolts. And slide the caliper mounting bracket back into place. Reinstall the bolts. And torque them to 34 foot-pounds, unless otherwise noted. Then we're going to transfer the low wear indicator clip from the old brake pads to the new. Slide our new brake pads into place. Coat the back of the brake pads with some high temperature caliper grease. And prepare our caliper to be mounted back onto the rotor. Remove it from the bungee cord. Remove our dust cover. Put our 8mm wrench onto the bleeder screw. Install our brake bleeder kit. Open the bleeder screw. Compress the piston using an old brake pad and our disc brake spreader. Once the piston is flush within the caliper, remove our disc brake spreader, the old pad, tighten up our bleeder screw, remove our brake bleeder kit, remove our 8mm wrench, reinstall our dust cover, and slide the caliper into place over the new brake pads and the rotor. Then we're going to apply some thread lock to the caliper guide pin bolts. Install the caliper guide pin bolts and tighten them up by hand or a wrench if necessary. And then we're going to torque them to 32 foot-pounds unless otherwise specified. Once we have the guide pins torqued, quickly we'll remove the hose clamp pliers and raise the hood, getting ready to bleed the brakes. We need to check the brake fluid in the master cylinder. If it's low, we'll need to add some. Then we're going to start with the caliper farthest from the master cylinder. This is the passenger side rear caliper. We'll remove our dust cover, install our 8mm wrench, install our brake bleeder kit, have your partner depress the brake pedal and hold it all the way down. We'll open up the bleeder screw and watch the fluid coming through the lines, making sure there's no air bubbles. And we tighten up the bleeder screw, have your partner release the brake pedal and depress again, holding it down. Never release the brake pedal with the bleeder screw open. Continue this process till there's no more bubbles in the brake line. Now we go back and check our master cylinder, add more fluid as necessary, and remove to the driver's side rear brake caliper. Remove our dust cover, install our wrench, bleeder kit, depress the brake pedal, open up the bleeder screw, watch for bubbles in the line, tighten up the bleeder screw, have your partner release the brake pedal, depress again, and again continue this until there's no more air bubbles in the brake fluid. Now tighten up the bleeder screw, remove our brake bleeder kit, remove our wrench, reinstall our dust cover, top off the master cylinder. Now we're going to get ready to reinstall our rear tires. Slide them out from under the vehicle, remove the lug nuts, slide the wheel into place, install our lug nuts by hand. And we'll snug them down using our 21mm socket and ratchet. Remember to use the special adapter on the locking lug nut. Move to the other side and do the exact same thing. With all the lug nuts snug down, we're going to raise our vehicle up and remove the jack stands. Lower the vehicle back onto the ground, and we'll torque our lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds unless otherwise noted. Always torque in a crisscross pattern. And do this for both sides. Now don't forget to put your special adapter into the glove box.
Well, we hope this video will help you change the rear brake pads and rotors on your 2007 Toyota Camry LE.
Send any comments you may have to comments@teachmeall.com. And as always, thank you for visiting teachmeall.com and have a great day.